Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Gears 5 Insane Difficulty video walkthrough. This is Act 4, and this is the penultimate act of the game. That, if you're a Gears fan, should mean something, because as most of you know, Gears always has 5 acts. This is the first Gears game, perhaps outside of Judgment. I don't actually remember the act system of Judgment, but a lot of people don't even count that as canon. But the official Gears games, the numbered ones, this is the first one that does not have 5 acts. And you can tell the game's not going to have 5 acts because of the way it was paced. Up to this point, both Act 2 and Act 3 have been kind of bloated with these new features of the exploration and the side missions, and you do quite a lot, and those chapters last quite a large amount of time. Act 1 and Act 4, by contrast, are not even remotely close to them, because they're half the length, and in my opinion, they're twice as good. I love this act. The story beats aren't my favourite, but the gameplay is exactly why I play Gears of War. And you might notice right now, which is my favourite thing in this game. Clayton Carmine, the roided up dude who doesn't die in his family, he's using the Hammer of Dawn. Oh, and look, the huge robot I mentioned that's not in this game at all, even though it was the coolest thing in Gears 4, still not going to get to ride it, unfortunately. They use it for platforming, and that's it. And I'd just like a show of hands, guys. Does that disappoint you as much as it disappoints me? Because one of the things I loved the most out of Gears 4 was these fellas. I loved the huge robot. I thought it was really fun to use that staple gun. Using cover as a huge dude. It was a really fun power trip, and the game could have used a bit more of that, in my opinion. But get on top of the car. That's then going to take Kay all the way into this next building. And this level, guys, this is how Gears really shines. It's destroyed beauty. It's the war has come home. It's all kicking off. It's conflict after conflict after story beat after conflict after emotional moment after conflict. There's no slow walking around and wondering about where the narrative is going. We're at war. We're being attacked. This is Gears of War. And it works so well. As I look around trying to find some ammo and things and maybe something to even the tide. But I'm not seeing anything, so... And there's a dude on it, there's like a sculpture over here, which is quite interesting. And then down here we have a pretty interesting battle against the Swarmak. I really like this one. So at the very beginning, guys, what we're going to do, we're going to jump over this wall. We're going to pick up the long shot because it's a beautiful piece of kit. We're going to then jump over that wall, move towards this side. And depending on what the Swarmak does, depends on what you want to do here. I'm flanking all the way behind him. And if he doesn't shoot at me, I'm not going to use the stim. If he starts shooting at me, I'm going to have to use the stim, because he's going to melt me. There are 2 elite grenadiers coming here. They have the overkill, and they're amazing when it comes to shotguns. With grenades, sorry, I said that wrong. Did you see what just happened then? I don't agree with that at all. That hit that dude in the face, and it did not headshot him, even though his helmet was off. That dude is a beefy son of a bitch. Here's another guy over here on the cheeky wall. Kill him. There is, I think, 2 more guys across from me, and they come out of that room. I'm going to get stuck in a real bad position coming up, and I go on the one piece of cover that won't let me mantle over it, and it gets bad. But luckily, stim is god tier. So kill that guy, and then move forward. They're going to come out of this building just in front of me. There's a warden. Right now, he's in his resting position. He's praying to Mecca, and we're about to reunite him with his prophet by dunking him with as many rounds as we can before he gets anywhere near us. And if he starts running, it's time to panic. Luckily, I have flash, so that's what I do. I didn't think he was going to turn, though, so I end up flashing him behind a wall, which was not the best from me. But this enemy is really fair, and I like him a lot. I just kind of wish that maybe... This is it, though. This is the mistake. Did you see that? Look at this. I can't mantle on that piece of cover. I have to be on that piece. That was a scary moment, guys. You know when you panic and you freeze? That was what that was. But there's a couple of elite drones through this doorway, and we know how beefy these guys are. We've been fighting them for a while now. These dudes do not say no. And we do have access to the claw, which is a cool weapon, but it's hard to recommend in the campaign, because it's not... By the time it gets accurate, you've probably already died. And unless you blind fire and then ADS once it once the spread gets a bit smaller, once it minimizes, you're going to have a tough time. Like, it makes me wish there was a brute shot. Remember that bad boy? God, the brute shot was cool. And this game is accepting that Gears Judgment is canon, because not only does it bring back Paddock, but it brings back the Markser like Gears 4 did, and those are all Judgment exclusive weapons. And I don't know if they're in the books maybe, and Judgment just use them because they're already canonical, but I feel like the brute shot, we don't need the shitty berserkers that came with it. Those things were like intermediary male berserkers, and I didn't like them at all. They were funny though, but the gun that they used I loved. And this Swarmak, you can't kill it by just hitting it with the hammer. You have to hit its blisters. So my advice is to kind of try and aim at its arms and its legs, and then aim at its face a decent amount to get the ones you need. And if you start doing damage, just drag your cursor to a different area. I really wanted to see here if I could just destroy his cannon, but it doesn't look like you can. If you remember in the old Gears, you could break the weapons, and it was part of ways that you killed them. But just keep on focusing on his blisters. God, I love the hammer. It feels so good in this game too. You don't use it half as much as I would have liked. Look, did you see that missile, by the way? Earlier on there was a missile that went past me and I had to look to see where it went because it vanished. I love the Hammer of Dawn, guys. Every time I use this gun it makes me happy. It reminds me of Gears 1. It reminds me of using it for a whole bunch of things they never thought you'd probably use it for, and it's such a cool tool. And on this act we're going to get to use it, but this act alone. It's an interesting creative choice though, because the hammer in this game is easy to use and it's really strong. I think they've used it more so to make it a spectacle and less like a tool. Because using the Hammer of Dawn in the old game, especially Gears 1, it was not the most accessible tool. Like, more people didn't pick the hammer up in the game because a lot of the times it just didn't work for them. You hear the as you're trying to use it and stuff, and people just didn't use it enough to understand how it was fully functioning. And if you played the multiplayer, it really taught you how to use the hammer, because you had to get really creative with it. And there was a skill ceiling on the hammer that this one doesn't have. This one has nuclear splash. You don't even have to be even remotely close to the enemies. The old hammer had that, but the detection to make it work was way worse. But just then, guys, I went around the battlefield picking up all the stuff. You have to go through the doorway that's where we were when I got into that spot of bother. It's opposite that courtyard. There's a doorway down there. Go through there. It will lead here. The reason I trimmed it out is because I ended up going AFK in the middle of it because I went to talk to my dad. We were talking about it, believe it or not. And my dad apologised for letting me watch it when I was younger, when I watched it with him. Because it traumatised me for years. And I don't think my dad remembered how brutal that movie was for a kid with a really active imagination. So when he watched the new version, he spent the whole movie being like, the old version can't have been this bad, it can't have been this bad. And I explained to him that it isn't as bad as the new one. The new one's trying to be a lot scarier, but it's still relative, isn't it? When I watched it when I was a child, it was terrifying because you believed it. It was real to you. And I had nightmares for many years about that, so we had a really interesting conversation as an adult when nowadays nightmares are the most fun dreams I can have, but I barely have them, and I don't even get scared remotely at horror movies because I was so brutally tortured as a child. So it was an interesting shift in the dynamic between me and my dad. It was a good conversation. But here is a couple of relics. There's a fight coming up that I really don't like here. It's not that it's a bad fight, it's just that you're in a bad position the whole time, and you're fighting against a stump, and I fucking hate the stumps, guys. I was trying my best earlier on in the walkthrough to be like, this enemy's kind of dumb, it doesn't make sense. I feel like it looks great, but it doesn't have a purpose. I was doing my best not to give you all my vitriol, because it's not fair for me to give you all this information and then ruin your experience. I don't want to do that. I don't want anyone who loves Gears 5 to be put off by Gears 5 because of my complaints. And I have lots of them. I think the game has a lot of problems, but I can't defend the stump anymore. It's such a fucking shit enemy, and it makes me sad because it's amazing to look at. It just doesn't have the mechanics, and I hope they address it or something, like maybe on inconceivable difficulty when they inevitably give us that, and I'll be making another guide. Maybe then the stumps make sense. Maybe they fly or something. Because I would have really liked an aerial enemy. I like the flock, but it doesn't do anything. You know, the flock is a great idea and a terrible concept. Thing just flies around dropping little dudes. That's all it is. It's like a flying emergence hole, only you can't seal it, and it should have been better. Because I have no problems with emergence holes. I think they're fantastic. I think the nests were an interesting inheritance, but the emergence holes to me are what made Gears so interesting. If you learn those positions, you can end a fight before it begins. You can't do that in this game. Most of these fights, you just kind of have to grit your teeth and War of Attrition it. And there's a lot of War of Attrition coming up on this level, because there's 2 fights that are some of the most challenging in the game, but I wouldn't even go as far as to say they're difficult. I would go as far as to say that you're just put in a really bad position, and if you play aggressively, you can die really quickly. And I'm going to be overly creepy here, guys, because this is the aforementioned Act 3 spooky section of this act. I can walk past this guy on the right without him reacting, and then go and execute the guy on the left without him reacting, but I don't know my thresholds yet, so I'm testing them. And normally, you wouldn't see this in a walkthrough, but every so often in Gears 5, I messed around a little bit to see how things worked. And this is one of those moments where I'm waiting for my cloak to come back, but I didn't need to. Because the cloak is really strong in this segment, that's the reason that I used it. If you don't have a chainsaw, the cloak is a really, really good alternative. You could probably even hijack too. Hijacking on this fight coming up, this is a tricky fight. There is a stump is stuck to the ceiling in front of us. On the right of you, there's a bunch of locusts that are all in a bad position. And my piece of advice here is to use hijack on the stump, and then use it as an opportunity to either kill the stump, because he won't attack you while you're doing it, or kill the things that are around it. Because for some reason, the stump doesn't do anything. If you don't push into this room and spawn everybody properly, the stump just seems to chill out. And I don't really appreciate that, because there's enemies over there, and he's not attacking them. And the whole point of that ability is to make him attack his friends. So you just kind of feel like you're getting robbed. But the enemies here are elites, so they take a massive beating. And I like to just sit on this section, because this is the place I had the most success. And be very careful of that. He has one of those explosive launchers. That thing is so dangerous. But I'm going to do a really passive strategy here. And it's just because I don't like this fight. Another strategy I tried that worked quite well until I got shotgunned or grenaded, I forget which it was. You can move up the level on the left and get onto the balcony where that big fellow is. But the grenades here, the random grenades, are an interesting problem in this one. Because they feel really cheap. But there's a ton of guys on the right. I'm waiting on hijack again. I'm taking my time here, guys. I'm popping heads. That's a leech, by the way. Be careful of that, because of course the stumps can send leeches after you. I'm kind of surprised the game didn't do a better job of explaining the leeches. Because when they first showed the leech transforming the DBs into something else, there's a bastion. See that? That was a crit on his eye. Did you see the damage that just did? Like right now, these shotgunner guys, terrifying. That's why I'm in this piece of cover. Because those dudes, they don't fuck about. They are so dangerous. I should just use my Lancer on my Boltok. There's no reason to use this sniper on these fellas. Look at Jack getting stuck in though. Jack is so good. There's a couple more of everybody's favourite enemy, the leechers. And then there's another bastion and another shotgunner. But Jack is pulling aggro, so the shotgunner's not even bothering me. Now he is. Now I need to be very careful. Stim. Ooh, I didn't have to. That was lucky. That's one of those moments, guys, though. I'm almost guaranteeing it. I bet I tried to stim just then, and Jack wouldn't do it. And if you look in the top left, I have the ability, but for whatever reason, sometimes he just doesn't. There's a leech, and there is the bastion protecting him again. There is his... Did you see that? That was his close-quartered move. He hits the ground with an AoE. But I feel like this thing could have been so much better. Like, you should have been able to shoot this thing's leg, and the leg would have taken a certain damage threshold until he falls over, and then the tracker ball in the core of the robot rolled out and rolled around, and that was what you had to kill. And then it's out of cover, it's out of the body for like, what, 10 seconds, 20 seconds as you shoot it, and then it rolls back in, and the robot heals its leg, and you do it again. I feel like that could have been really cool. But instead I'm going to grenade tag it after I hijack it, because it does loads of damage. That's a really good way of killing them, and then we get a big micro stutter just then. They could have done so much with that enemy and they just didn't. And it really bugs me because there's not that many new enemies in the game. This is the fucking 6th Gears game. You're introducing, what, 3, 4 new enemies? And half of them don't do all. I don't know, man. I'd love to work for the Coalition because I just feel like there needs to be somebody saying something. I feel like they're either all surrounded by yes men or they don't play Gears. Like, you know, I've played a lot of Gears. I know a lot of people who've played a lot of Gears, and when you introduce a new enemy, they have to mean something. They have to make sense. There has to be something they bring to the table that all the other enemies don't. And you might have noticed that in this campaign. There's now a lot of enemies to choose from, so the enemies that the game chooses are more noticeable now on design. Like, did you notice at the beginning of the game, you came across a lot of Scions that had bus kills? Did you notice that? The first Scion you bumped into probably had a boom shot, and then the second one had a bus kill. And there was a handful of ones with bus kills, and then you haven't seen one with a bus kill since. Hasn't happened. It's interesting. Like, they've got such a pantheon. Like, think of the enemies that are a pain in the ass. You don't see trackers in this game, because they're non-existent, pretty much. You don't see the DR1s because they've all been turned into stumps, who are not my favourite guy. You also can't mantle with heavy weapons, which is frustrating. I didn't know that until this moment. But you would usually get juvies, trackers, and if you didn't get those two things, it was a different type of fight. In Gears 4, that was the close-up, you know, close proximity, get out of cover, know what you're doing or you're going to get overwhelmed. Whereas in this game, you have the juvies again, you have the rejects when they introduce those guys, and now you have the leeches. So you're getting mobbed by a lot of things. You can also get mobbed by the Warden. Like, it's interesting. I was wondering if the Warden was going to kind of be like a priest for the leeches. You know how the Cantus was kind of like the high priest of reviving everybody and being a dickhead and throwing ink grenades and then screaming and getting headshotted and killed because he was a scrub? Like, the Cantus was really good for that because he had a place, he was frustrating, and you had to focus on him. I almost feel like maybe the Warden should be the reason that the leech is around, but if you've played the game, you know that's not the reason at all. It's something else. And it's something else that doesn't make a lot of sense because we've killed a Kraken before, and it didn't have the ability to take over technology. Apparently that's a newly inherited skill. But this is my favourite fight in the game, guys. This is 2 to 3 fights in a row. And the first one starts off with Paddock being essentially pinned down by a pouncer and by a bunch of drones. Once you get rid of this, there's going to be a second spawn of pretty much everything that's in the game, and then it's going to be topped off by a Warden. And the Warden here is really nerve-wracking, because if he kills you, you have to do a pretty big fight again. So it's got a wonderful combination of, it's a great environment, quintessential courtyard from Gears of War, it's got all the cover you need, it's got good positions for you, good positions for them, lots of flanks, lots of creativity with what you can use. It's just immaculate. We've got nests turning up that you can seal with grenades if you throw them correctly, and that was not correct. See what I mean? That looked correct. If that had just fell in the net... Look at the bounce on that, dude. It took me 2 grenades to seal that hole. I ended up throwing 3 because I didn't trust it at all. Here's another nest. I'm going to seal this with a grenade. I don't know if this works, but it should. But this is spectacular. I love this fight. I'm going to use this position of flank to get as much of an advantage as I can, and then I'm going to gradually push down. I'm not going to fight the pouncer at all, because Paddock's going to deal with that. But there's lots of dudes here. If I can't see them, I have a long shot. That's going to help me see them. And as long as I'm in a position of power and in an advantage, I'm going to be okay. Once that's done, we're going to pick up the tri-shot, and then we're going to use that to thin the next herd. And it's just going to be a case of intelligence, keeping them at a bad position, keeping yourself in a good position, and making sure you don't make the mistake that Locust made by thinking he was in cover when he wasn't. And just keep popping heads, guys. Enjoy it, because this reminds me of Gears 1, this one. It reminds me of some of the stuff that you do in, like, Campus Grinder. It's a really nice one. It's also quite reminiscent of Gears 4. And a piece of information that you might not have remembered or you might have not known to begin with. These nests that turn up in the middle of them as a reward for dealing with them, they will always give you an explosive option of some sort. It might be grenades, it might be a drop shot, it will always have something in that's worth checking out, and it will always be something that will then go in handy for whatever comes next. So coming up here there's going to be a checkpoint, so make sure you grab the tri-shot. This thing is brilliant. And then now the second act begins. Smoke's going to turn up because the hunters love to throw smoke. If you're really unlucky here, the hunters can throw smoke on your position and it fucks everything up because you can't see. Also, they don't really talk about why the hunters can go invisible, and if there's a piece of a collectible that explains it, I haven't read it. So I didn't really understand what that was all about until I saw it in Act 2. In Act 2, at the beginning, in the village, you see an enemy that's got like the weird reddy hue to it, because it's invisible but it's not. And then you shoot it and then you notice, you know, Mr. Dreadlocks who's behind it. And it's just this thing where I think they kind of expect us to just know, oh, he's like the Predator, that's what he does. Because I don't remember them going invisible in the 4th game. Then again, I don't remember them doing much in the 4th game, except for being dickheads on that one fight towards the end, where you have to defend outside of that place before they come in the big robots. But we've got a nest on this side. I'm going to throw a grenade to close it. Was that a good one? That's more like it. That's the type of shit I used to do in Gears 1. Take one glance, look into the sky, throw the nade, fix the situation. Here come. Look at the tri-shot, guys. Look at this gun. Do you know if I could change this gun in one area, I would make it so that it only started misfiring when the bar is full. Because I don't like the fact that you can fire this an extra quarter of its bar, but if you do, it's almost worthless because it doesn't fire correctly. But here comes a drop shotter with a Bastion, and he's got a couple buddies with him. I don't trust those guys at all. They are wizards with that weapon, and you should not trust them either. Don't even take the chance. I'd love to see whether or not you can use stim to get out of being hit by a drop shot. I would imagine you can. And just be careful, because these Immagos are actually pushing. But they get headshotted so quickly, you should be able to take them out. And here comes the Big Daddy himself. I'm in a good position here. The only way he can hit me is if he bounces it. But don't even give them the time of day. Scions can do things with that weapon that only the Worms in Team 17 Worms games can do with the rocket launcher and the wind. It is... I have seen some crazy shit, guys. I've seen people get headshotted mid-roll. How the fuck do you headshot somebody mid-roll? I nearly died then. Whew, that was close. This is a great fight. But if you listen, when I kill this guy, you'll hear Dell shout Warden. Or maybe he already has. Oh, he probably already has, because there's a Bastion, and then that's the Warden. So at this moment, in my mind, I'm thinking, if he runs at me, he has a programmed path to jump at me. If I put geometry between me and him, he can't jump over it, he has to mantle. The one weakness that the Warden has is his inability to jump over cover, from what I've seen. Of course, I've said that now, so someone's going to be in the comments saying, oh, he jumped over cover and killed me. And for you, I'm very sorry, I haven't seen that yet. But I like to keep distance from this guy, and then when he starts to run at me, I try to blind him with Jack. This is not the best Warden fight you've seen me do, but at this point, I was just trying to stay alive, and if that ain't classic Gears of War, I don't know what is. And this guy will go for you. He attacks your team convincingly, but he likes you the best. You're his favourite. It's just like Jeepers Creepers, man. He's giving you the wink and the tongue and everything. But right now I can't see him, which is unfortunate. But I'm thinking he's behind that huge piece of rock, and there he is. So I mark him to hope that the team do extra damage. I don't know if they actually do, but it's one of those placebos that I do. And this guy's so fair. Like, he's almost a little bit too fair, I would say. Because I've been killed by the Wardens. If you get close to them, you're dead. But I feel like that's how it should be, because that's what the Maulers were like. The Maulers were hilarious, because if you killed them at a distance, they were never a threat. But if they ever got close, and I mean ever, you died. And if you didn't die, you got lucky. Like, Maulers were so goddamn dangerous. but they were only dangerous within their range. And I think that that's the perfect kind of enemy. The perfect kind of enemy is one that is real effective where it needs to be effective, and in everything else, it's vulnerable. But that's it, guys. That is easily my favourite fight in the game, and it's shouldered with my second favourite fight in the game, which is not actually a challenging fight, but it's Hammer of Dawn time, baby, and it doesn't get much more fun for me. If I could carry the hammer through this entire level, I would have had a super good time, and you might even be able to use the Hammer of Dawn in this battle, but I never tried. So, it wouldn't surprise me if it was conveniently offline, because that's what this game does. And I've never really appreciated that, because I feel like the hammer's just awesome. It'd be really cool if in New Game Plus, you could carry a hammer through the full game, and it didn't matter about satellites, it was just like, here's a Hammer of Dawn, knock yourself out. Here's a Hammer of Dawn that in itself is a satellite, and you can just keep using it. Because that's what Gears of War is. When you distill it down to its elements, Gears of War is these encounters with these chest-high walls, in these crypt-like structures, in this decaying, broken future, using a ridiculous satellite targeting laser to absolutely destroy anthropomorphized baddies. Like, that is what Gears is. It's those moment-to-moment encounters, it's that tactical use of cover, it's the flanking, it's all of that. But it's moved so far away from it that this game's more about fucking sailing around and listening to two knobheads talk. And I know the irony, guys. I've been talking on this walkthrough now for like 5 hours, and I'm feeling like a bit of a bellend myself. But at the very beginning here, there is a spawn of scions on that left-hand side. I tried to hit them off the spawn as best as I can, and that particular beam just then was to catch anybody that I didn't kill in the initial bombardment. Then there are scions on the other side that you want to hit. Your team will hit as well, and your team's pretty good here. Once you've killed these ones, pouncers turn up. There's like 5 of them too, 5 or 6 pouncers, really, really strong. And they melt real quick with the laser. Look at that. Really fun. But you'll notice, once you use your full load on the hammer, it will then go black, and then it turns white to tell you that you can fire it again. There's no ambiguity now about the targeting and the cooldown, because it's all visual, which is a really, really good thing for people who don't understand how the hammer works. And this thing is just nuclear. So there's one more pouncer left, and then there's going to be a Snatcher. And the Snatcher spawns where I was looking just then. This might actually be a normal dude over there somewhere. But like, look at that, dude. You don't mess with the hammer, dude. And this Snatcher, if you get onto him quick enough, you can kill him off spawn. He never has to land and he never has to attack. But the AI knows where the bad guys are, so if you put your hammer near where the AI is firing, you'll probably take them out. And then here comes the big one. So he stops for a second on this platform, and if you get onto him quick enough, you'll kill him on the platform. Like, look at that. What a beautiful fight. And then there's another Snatcher that turns up here. And he's just not going to have a good time. There was his quill. Never forget, that's a one-shot kill, guys. And they don't miss. The only way to stop that from hitting you is by putting cover in the way. Or using stim, because I'm almost certain stim will let you take that. And then there's a transition after a pretty big decision in the plot into the final chapter of the game. This is another really fun chapter, but it does have one of the weaker fights. There's a fight coming up that's kind of a kitchen sink kind of scenario, and it goes wrong so quick. You can die in so many ways, and the worst part is your team dies a lot. I died more because my team was dying than I ever got killed. And because it's such a dangerous fight too, where pouncers can get behind you and kill you really quickly if you don't set up in the right places, it takes a long time. And then if you want to do it the way I normally do it, which is grenade tagging pouncers so I don't waste ammo, the pouncers aren't cooperative. So the whole thing is uncooperative pouncers, lots of other dudes, your team keeps dying, and there's another bloody stump. So it's pretty much all the bad elements together to make a fight really boring, but you die really quickly if you overextend. And I'm going to give you a piece of advice here, guys, that I do not do myself. We're going to pick a bus kill up that's to my right. Do not use this on this coming fight, save this for the fight that's coming up afterwards, because it's one of the harder fights in the game, because you're in a position of advantage, a position of disadvantage almost the whole time. And I'm going to use it on fucking Juvies because I'm just not clever. But if I were to record this again, I would save this, and I'm almost certain the game won't take it off you, and it's just going to make your day easier. I cannot begin to tell you how easy the next encounter is to lose. It's kind of boring. That's the problem. If you play it safe, it's boring. If you play it aggressively, it's easy to die. And when you compare it to the last encounter, where it's this big place that you can get all over and be in different places and have different advantages, and then you compare it to what you're about to see, this next place, there's like one position of advantage that you can get flanked on, you can get pounced on, and you can just get unlucky and get grenaded. The amount of unlucky grenades you'll die to in the sequence coming up is another one of the big issues. But the big one is your team dying. My team died, I think, 3 or 4 times. Because you've seen how slow it is to kill the stumps. They take a ridiculous amount of damage, especially when you're at long distance. And while I was killing the final enemy, the game says, oh, 1 left! One of my teammates died. And that was actually on my first ever attempt at this courtyard. And I'll never forget it, because I was just like, wow, why did I fail? This was not difficult. And then the next few attempts, I got really, 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 really unlucky. Like, there's a grenade at the beginning when you run in for me, and that grenade killed me like a handful of times because I kept forgetting it was happening. Like, it was... And this is weird too. This piece of cover that I'm next to, if you go too far to the left you fall down. And I noticed something. When you mantle up the step to get on here, if you aim too soon during a mantle, you will aim on the wrong side. This is something that's been in Gears for a while, and it's one of those oddities of the engine. So if you don't understand third-person shooters too much, guys, most contemporary third-person shooters have the ability to swap shoulders. That is just a specific way of saying, do you see how when I aim my gun when I'm out of cover, everything is always on the right? My character's always emphasized on the left, my aim is always emphasized on the right. I can't swap this direction. I can't look on the left and have the character on the right. It doesn't exist. There are ways to do it, but they're exploiting the system that exists, because there's no system as it stands that lets you do it. There may be a key in the key bindings that I haven't got bound that lets you do it, but to my knowledge you cannot swap shoulders in this game. In almost every other shooter you'll play this year you can. You can swap it in Remnant, you can swap it in Battlefront 2. This is the hard battle, by the way. In this game, to shoot on the left you have to be in cover. To shoot on the left while moving freely, you have to start in cover aiming on the left and then back out of cover and then keep aim held. That's the only way to do it. Outside of that circumstance, and when you mantle on something and aim too quickly and the game doesn't adjust. Those are the only 2 times that you can effectively flip the camera. And considering it's 2019 and we've had over 10 years of Gears of War, I don't really understand why this is still a thing. This is an old school mentality that should die. There's no reason for it. And I'll never understand why they keep it, because they now have fucking hit markers like every other game. They now have HP bars and numbers of damage coming off enemies if you turn it on. Like, they have literally every single other thing every other contemporary third-person shooter has, except perhaps the most important tool of survival. And I can't really understand why. It's one of those creative choices that is weird. It's kind of like the 3-player co-op, that's actually 2-player co-op, where one player gets to do fuck all and hate his life the entire time and wonder why Gears of War 3, a game that came out in 2011 or some shit like that, is so much better than the game that came out 8 years later, with 8 years of technological advancements. Why is Gears of War 3 a better game than this? That's not how that should be. By the way, that was scary. But Stim is all-powerful, and Jack saved my ass just then. So remember when I said you can get flanked, you can get rushed by shotgunners, you can get grenaded by shotgunners? That's what kind of happens. And right now, I don't have a bolt-talk, and this gun I'm using, I don't like it. It's not viable. One of the problems I have here is I don't like wasting my guns. I don't like wasting boom shots on pouncers unless I can get a guaranteed kill. So luckily, Jack is a beast and he's going to keep giving me guns, and I'm just going to use classic Gears of War tech of sitting in cover, getting shit done. But be aware, the piece of cover that I'm on right now, not only can I get flanked by Mr. Clawman up the arse there, but if a pouncer jumps on this cover and I don't have stim, I'm dead. And he can jump on this cover at any time, he just hasn't. And right there, a stump has just turned up that I'm going to have to use hijack on because he's kind of a nuisance. And this is just, it's long. It's long. It's an awkward bunch of enemies. It's an awkward environment. And I hijacked his little buddy, and he's going to give me a shield, and now I'm going to kill him. Because I don't really want a shield, if I'm honest. I just wanted to be able to shoot this guy. And in his defense, this guy's a beast. He fucks off. I barely get a chance to shoot him, and then he leaves. That's perfect. Gosh, there's such a good enemy. I'd never thought you'd hear me compliment a Sentinel. I never thought it would happen. Do you know what I should be doing? I should be picking up that claw. That claw that dropped at this range, it'd be pretty good. It's a strong gun. It's really strong in multiplayer. You can kill people with a claw in multiplayer in like 4 hits. But I'm going to use a boom shot because I'm getting impatient now, and you can tell. I just don't like this fight. It's not how I would have done it, but there'll be somebody out there that enjoys it, which is cool. And it's definitely a tricky one. It's an unconventional one, and it's tricky. And if anything, at least it's kind of interesting as much as it's not my favourite. There's also a guy beneath me here that I'm going to throw this grenade at. It's moments like this when I wish I had the tools that I would have wanted to have at this moment. Like if I had a long shot here, or if I had that bus kill would have killed those pouncers so quickly. But at the same time, guys, if you get lucky and the pouncers jump towards you and you can stick a grenade on them, you can get rid of them really quickly, and this fight goes really fast. But you know, when I was doing the beginning of this encounter, all I was waiting for was the pouncer to get close. I wasn't trying to like kill everybody really quickly or be a beast or anything. I was just waiting for him to jump over to me so I could kill him. That's all I wanted him to do. And I had several attempts where the pouncers ignored me the whole fight. And this is me showing you the claw. You haven't seen this yet, I don't think, in my run too much. I think I used it a little bit in Act 3. I didn't like it all that much when I used it, because I feel like it's strong, but it takes a bit too long to get going for standard infantry. But against anything like this, it's actually pretty good. Against the carriers, this is a good gun. This is kind of built for those kind of a target, you know, big target, don't attack all that frequently, lots of HP. But there's me hijacking him and then shooting him a bit. This is a good example of why I don't like the stumps. Because they're just boring. Their greatest sin is that they're squandered opportunity. They could have been so cool. And I'd love to know, guys, what you would do with them to change them. Because I feel like something's missing. I feel like they designed an enemy that has everything but a fucking point. And that's the biggest thing they need. And speaking of sections in this game that don't really have a point, so remember the derricks in Gears 2, which were actually really hard? On Insane, that section could be a pretty difficult sequence. Well, fear not. I don't even think you have to shoot your gun on this. I think this is purely cinematic. Almost as cinematic as that Swarmac disappearing. But it gives you the impression that you have to fight, but you don't. And this game does this all the time. It sets up a situation that looks like it's going to be a cool segment to do Gears gameplay, and then you don't have to do anything, or the game resolves it for you. And this is a hard fight, so I have a really aggressive strategy here, which I don't usually do in this game because it's not always the safest thing. But in this, you start in a bad position. So getting up here is really important. And watch this. That guy got DSP'd. If you saw Phil's multiplayer footage, you'll know what I mean. But once you come up here, there are a bunch of snipers going to spawn. If you kill these elites and you get their rifle, you can sit on a height advantage and take everybody out. Just then, I don't know how I'm alive, guys. I don't know how I managed to hijack him before he killed me. That was about as close as it's going to get. This is why you don't fight up close like this on Insane, because your advantage is non-existent and theirs is huge. They do more damage than you do, they have more life than you do, there's no reason to ever be here, but for this particular strategy, this really worked. And also, this is one of the better places to stand for the Juvies, because they can't ambush you the same. They have to come from you from 2 directions, instead of from a million directions. So, this is a hunter spawning as well, and he's about to go invisible. And I managed to get some spawn kills. It gets really chaotic, but the hunters can't kill you, because they have to charge a torque bow, and if they pull out a boltock, you're done. But they don't, normally. So, kill these Juvies, use your cover. That's terrible cover, by the way. It doesn't let you mantle over it from that side. And just see the torque bow? Scary news. Gotta be real careful. He needs to die. I'm stuck right here as well. That was a scary moment. And there is an Imago. And he's not very accurate, which is kind of cool. I get my stim back. I turn around. I pepper him. I'm about to get chased by both Juvies and Hunters. Which, this is about as exciting as a fight can get in Gears 5. Because this is just ridiculous. You can sit at the bottom, guys, and do this slowly, but the problem is there's so many enemies that have better positions than you do that you just feel like you're overwhelmed the whole time. I decided to take the battle to them because I got really sick of peppering at people from a distance. Also, that hunter that left, he's not dead. He's somewhere. I don't know where. Oh, there he is. And you can see him in his cloak, too. That was awesome. And he's coming to punch me. This is scary. You do not ever want to be close to a Locust. And he's back, and I need to run away. But luckily, he doesn't have an option to kill me, so he's trying to beat me up. And it's like he thinks his dad is harder than my dad, and his dad's going to beat my dad up, and my dad's running away. So fortunately, for me, I don't know where he is at this moment. And then he charges the torque. But because the hunter is so fair, he can't kill me unless he's close to me. And he's not as good as I am at the movement. So I'm going to dick him with a Talon. But that's it now. Now that he's dead, we have the high ground, and everybody else is beneath us. They can only climb up from 2 perspectives, and if they do, you'll hear them. And that's why this position is worth fighting for. But if you can't get this to work and you're having a tough time, guys, just stay down by the boxes. You'll be fine. Something worth noting, though, is that this is a particularly bad section for glitches. So did you see how we just got a checkpoint? What's going to happen now is a carrier's going to spawn and a flock's going to spawn. This is not a difficult encounter. The flock might as well be scenery. The carrier, he'll kill you if he hits you with his cankers, but he has a difficult time coming upstairs, so he's going to have a real hard time finding you. That just then is about as dangerous as it gets. Focus on the flock first, then focus on the carrier. However, you need to be aware, guys, when I did this the first time, it soft-locked the game. It's supposed to tell you when these enemies die that you need to get back on the vehicle with Faz and leave this section, and it never triggered, and I had to restart the checkpoint. Luckily, I thought this whole section would be on 1 checkpoint, and it wasn't. These 2 big boss characters that turn up get their own checkpoint, and the game is actually pretty good for that, even though it shouldn't soft-lock when you do an encounter. But focus on the pacifist that is the flock. Try not to get blindsided by the leeches. They're the only real threat. And just kind of question what this enemy does. Because other than being good practice for your aim, I can't answer that question. And it's dead. And that's a boss type enemy that's in the pantheon of the wonderful Gunker. One of the most terrifying enemies in the history of the franchise, who thankfully is not in this game. Whoever designed the Gunker is an evil genius. Because the carrier's a cream puff compared. One of the things with the carrier that can be a little bit frustrating is when you're close to him and he does the cankers, the way they track means that they have a high tendency to just nuke you. And it means that distance is always going to be your friend against this guy. But you can also fire the boom shot when he's about to summon them, and the explosion will get rid of them, but I fired that too soon. The reason I'm using the boom here, folks, is to try and speed this up. Because just a show of hands, I am quite curious. Wow, that was close. Do you think the carrier is a fun enemy? Because I feel like a lot of the Gears 4 enemies suffer from the same thing. They have very specific tools, very specific uses, but they're not that interesting. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like the Gears 5 stuff they've introduced has got a lot of creativity in it, but then they don't have anything either. It's like they're good at the visuals on the enemy, but then they don't know what to do with it. Because if you think about it, that was a bad idea. Both the carrier and the Snatcher are the same enemy. The only difference is when you get close to a Snatcher, he gulps you up, and if you get close to this guy, he just like rips you apart. Both of them move towards you in varying degrees of mobility, and both of them have a projectile that they telegraph that if it hits you, you die. The difference here is the Snatcher has a dynamic element to him because he steals people who go down, but it's also a moment of weakness because he can no longer do certain moves when you're in his tummy, and also then he does his breath a lot more, which is an extra move he's got. The carrier only has that direct chest burst fired missile, which is kind of just a different version of the projectile he already has. So when you look at them on paper, the carrier is just like the Snatcher, only less interesting. He still does have, you know, different moves and stuff, like he can bang the ground, he can do a bunch of different stuff, but they've made the same enemy, but they made one of them skinny and one of them fat. And that's the difference when you really look into it. The difference between them is just body type. Because you fight them the exact same way. The big distinction is that the carrier's weak point is hidden until he exposes it, so it's more of a counter battle, whereas the Snatcher's weak point is always available, making it a more enjoyable battle. And it's one of those things where when you look at it like that, why does he exist? It's kind of interesting, I guess. I guess I've never really thought about it. Because I don't know if you can do the same with the other Gears enemies. Do you remember the armoured Cantus? That's where the glitch happened, by the way. That's why there's a crossfade. The armoured Cantus runs around, rolls around, being a nuisance with his double gorgons and screaming and everything. That guy's unique. Doesn't have the most moves, doesn't do the most things, but if you get close to him, you're fucking dead. And that's all that matters. The Serapede. That thing has like 2 moves, right? It chases you like an arsehole super quick and it's terrifying, or it spits at you, and that's like it. But that thing is memorable because when it turned up it was terrifying and I never wanted to ever see it again. Because that thing was dangerous. So dangerous. And then you've got something like a Gunker. So dangerous. And all kinds of goofiness to him. But then you had enemies that were almost like comic relief. Like the Flammer. The Flammer is probably the most underappreciated enemy in the franchise. Because he's garbage. He's literal shit. He's trash. He's not a good guy at all. He uses a flamethrower that has about 3 meters of range when he's 50 meters away. And he never learned that that's not an effective use of a flamethrower. But I still love him because he's literally a joke enemy. But if you get close to him, he'll fuck you up. He is a warden who's a clown. He's like a silly version of a warden. Only here the warden plays it super safe, and the Flammer's just absolute comic value the whole time. You know, he's comic relief. Like the Mauler. Mauler is really dangerous up close, but when he's at a distance, it's almost like you feel sorry for him. And did you see the stutters just then, guys? Lots of stutters on that moment. It's not even that much of a crazy moment, really. You'd think this would be way worse, because there's all these particles happening, and all these different colours and shadows, and bloom and stuff. But again, this is another sequence, guys, where you don't even have to fire your gun. And Gears has had moments like this in the past, but I can't help but feel like if this was in a different game, there would be a turret at the back of this, and we would be forced to defend ourselves. Whereas at this moment, all you're really forced to do is survive. because it's purely a cutscene. It's a mobile cutscene leading to the end of the game. And did you expect this to be a big fight? Because I know I did. And this is where the game subverts expectations again. It's been doing this the whole game. Watch what happens here. You get out of this truck, and it says defend. Hold your ground. You see a ton of locusts coming your way, a ton of cover. This is going to get messy really quick. This is going to be epic. You start shooting the juvies, you see the barrels, you see there's nowhere to go, you have to stand here, you have to hold the line. You see the scions turning up, you're like, dude, this is going to be tough. I don't know if this is going to be all that doable. This could be the hardest section so far. And then before you know what's happening, before it's really kicked off, they send reinforcements, and the reinforcements essentially end the fight, and then you can leave. And look at that! 4 Guardians with tri-shots come and kill everything. And it's a good moment, because it's like, yeah, the goodies are coming together and unifying, you know? It's like the end of Endgame, where they all come through the portals. It's like, oh my god, we're all here, it's going to kick ass. But you just missed out on a gauntlet of standing and holding the line. And holding the line in Gears games can be terrifying and exhilarating and some of the best sections in the game. But instead of giving us the choice, they saved us. And it's weird. And it happens all the time. And there's plenty of other moments in this franchise where we would have done that as a gameplay segment, but this game has robbed you of that segment. And I don't know why. Because it lets you do this bit, and this bit is questionable at best. So, remember how I said that the flock is this great idea that doesn't work in how it's enabled in the game? It just doesn't fully realise itself? Well, this is a section that really highlights as why. So, there's 2 of us on turrets here defending this line, and there's a bunch of flocks in the sky. This is almost like a bully at school picking on a scrawny kid. Because these flocks, they don't even fire at me. They exist to be shot. Like, this is like a flock killing field right now. This is World War II, and I'm on the mounted machine gun. And I'm just mowing down men who stand no chance. And in the heat of the moment, I suppose you could think it's kind of epic because you're holding the line, you're trying to defend, you're doing everything you can to make sure they don't get close, but I'm never in danger. There's no stakes. There's no risk. I'm on a fucking turret, and this enemy doesn't attack. And it doesn't make sense. All this part does is make me feel for the bloody flock. Because it's a cool enemy that never stood a chance to be an enemy. So it's just scenery that gets shit on the whole game. And that previous moment, when there was hundreds of horde that could be coming towards us as we defend, there could have been swarmax, there could have been corpses, there could have been everything that's missing from these games these days, and instead, they give you Krill. Krill in a section that's a turret section that couldn't be more boring because nothing's happening. And I don't get it. And now we fight the final boss, which is the Kraken. Which we've seen before, so you know how this works, but it's slightly different now, because we have a cheesy spot. So, at the beginning, if you move over to this corner, you can stand close to the ammo, and the tongues will never grab you. The tongues work in quite a simple way. I've already explained it, but I'll do it again. There's a middle tongue, there's a left tongue, and there's a right tongue. If you stand in their lane, the tongue will grab you. If it grabs you, it's a one-hit kill, pretty much. You're better off restarting, unless you have, you know, fingers of an expert Guitar Hero master who's able to do Jordan solo B on 250 times normal speed with one hand. Like, I'm talking the kind of taps that are just not even worth bothering because you're going to break your keyboard and still die. But what happens is, if you stand in mid and you kill the middle tongue, the other tongues will go for your friends and they almost never ever go for you. As long as you kill the tongue that's on your side of the room, you are generally safe in this encounter. For this bit though, you don't need to even do that. You can stand off to the side here, you can get free shots on all the tongues, get free ammo, and if this game was perhaps designed a little bit better, you could spin that turret around and just shoot it with that. And what's going to happen is you're going to stun this creature by shooting its tongues. And when you stun it, you're going to come over here and you're going to use this railgun to shoot it. It's going to summon a swarm to come and attack you, but as we've learned from the swarm, or the flock as it's called, this enemy couldn't kill you if you gave it a Hammer of Dawn. So instead, it attacks me with a leech, I use my armor, and then I use this turret. And watch the sensitivity on this turret. Watch how quickly I turn this. See that? If you're playing on mouse and keyboard, you'll know the mouse sensitivity on this turret is like 1 DPI. It's the slowest it could ever conceivably be. But I have an option on my mouse to swap between sensitivity profiles. I have an option that's 14,000 DPI. If you don't know much about what that is, that's really, really high. I clicked onto that profile to see how quickly I could move the turret, and it moved it ridiculously. So if you want to move it a bit quicker, that's what you can do. But the next time I shoot the turret, you'll see 1800 DPI, and you'll see the difference. It is a nuclear difference. But now that we've destroyed its mandible, we can now shoot it in its tongues a lot easier, and the closer you are to the tongues when you shoot them, the more damage your gun does, because the damage drop-off penalty is not as high, and you cannot be grabbed here. You will never get grabbed by this monster. What's going to happen, guys, is I think I stunned the boss, and I go to use the cannon, but I haven't stunned the boss, and I put myself into a place where the boss can actually grab me. And it's a bit of an issue, because it's dangerous, but I know this boss fight enough that I'm not worried because I have faith in my aim, and I have faith in my ability to dodge the tongue. You can dodge the tongue by just rolling left or right. Sometimes you'll dodge and it still grabs you. It's kind of the nature of the beast. And because I'm this far away, my damage is going to take a little bit longer to hit the boss. But I only have to kill a few tongues before I stun him, and then it'll be the next phase of the fight, which is a kind of a interesting sequence. It's a bit deceptive though. Can you remember how when we slid towards the boss and we shot its tentacles in its mouth, its tonsils? We could shoot them at any distance and it was fine. The next time that happens, it's not going to be fine. You have to wait till you're closer to it, and I would recommend getting an active. That's what I'm going to do anyhow. And there's going to be a transition here, because I go to the button, but it doesn't let you do it, and then it sucks you in every time. So right now is a transition, there's my active. Wait until you see the reticle. Wait until you're closer and then shoot. If you don't, you will shoot all your rounds, a ton of them won't even register, and then you will get eaten, and you'll have to try it again. But that was the slower DPI. Did you see how different the scrolling was? And now we've shot him twice. The only thing left to do now is to back up and wait for the final moment of the campaign. But that's the end of the game, guys. An interesting adventure, to say the least. Hit and miss in some areas. Insane was tough in some parts, but not quite as nightmarish as some of the things you've done in the previous games. And I wonder if I'll see you all again in an Inconceivable run if they end up releasing that 6 months down the line like they did before. Hopefully you get your achievement for doing this, guys. I didn't. You can check all my chapters, they all say beaten solo on Insane, but for some reason the game just decided to glitch out on me because it's got a lot of problems. And it is by far the buggiest Gears I've ever played, and in many ways a weaker Gears for me personally, but it's still an amazing game, and I wish you well with it because there's a lot of fun to have here. So thank you if you had the patience to sit through me jabbering all this time. I hope the videos helped, and I will see you all on whatever the next project is that I cover. You take care now.